Sometime this week, I believe BJ sent emails out to all the students, most likely to your personal email address that had a estimated financial aid offer on it. That is because right now we have not started to package students for the fall of 23 term. That'll occur sometime towards the end of January, beginning of February. But we want to at least give you an idea what your financial aid package would be, what the cost would be. Official costs aren't released until end of June, beginning of July, when the Board of Trustees meets. But we've been pretty good at estimating what the charges are from year to year. So we're pretty comfortable. Once we do package you officially in January, February, that'll be close to what the actual cost is. The cost of attendance, which we'll go into here in a couple minutes on the emails that BJ sent out earlier this week, are based upon this year's charges. So that is going to differ between now, what you have now, and what you see in January, February. There were about 5 students who should have received a email this afternoon or this morning that we're missing your social security number, to call BJ or to call Holly or in our office to update that. We need your social security number in the system in order to pull in the FAFSA in order to get you packaged. Another segment of students BJ emailed this morning were those who do not have a FAFSA on file. Most likely directed you to go out to studentaid.gov, check to make sure our school code is out there. BJ, can you throw that in the chat, please?
Sure.
There was one student who required a DRN number. What that tells us is the DRN stands for data release number. It tells us you filed a FAFSA, but we as in Pitt do not have it. So you would have to go out and add our school code again that BJ is putting in the chat. There may have been, did I miss any populations, BJ, before we start the actual presentation?
Just the fall 24 one.
Okay, sorry, we do have, I think we may have a fall 24 in here. Obviously, it's about a year early, so you want to pay attention to the first half of the presentation when I talk. And when BJ talks about the second half, don't ignore him, please. He'll get upset, but keep that in mind for this time next year. So I'm see if I can get my screen shared here. All right, BJ, give me a thumbs up. You can see the financial aid screen, sir. All right. So again, this is going to be a quick overview of financial aid. I'm Brian. You've met BJ. We also have Red Bittner and Joyce Eager from admissions online. If you two want to pipe up and say hello, you can do that. I'm not sure if the students have met you guys or not.
Hi, everyone.
All right, we're going to go through the different types of financial aid, how to apply for financial aid, determining financial aid, and your award letters. 2 big types of financial aid. You have gift aid, grants, scholarships, which are free money, money that does not have to be paid back. Self-help aid are your loans and work study. Loans obviously have to be paid back. That's your subsidized and unsubsidized loans, Parent Plus loans, private education loans. Basically anything that's, any loan is going to be used to help pay the education of your son or daughter. And typically those will be paid back when the student's out of school. Work study is basically a part-time on-campus job. It does not go against the bill or charges. So whenever you're trying to figure out what you owe at bottom line, do not take that amount off. Essentially, extra spending money for the weekends around here if they don't come home every weekend, laundry money, going out, pizza money on Friday nights. But again, it does not come off the charges. Where does financial aid come from? You can see 4 different segments here, 4 different agencies: federal government, the state government. I know we have a few out-of-state folks, so if you're not from the state of PA, check the states that you are residing in to see if they have any state grants. I think Maryland, we have one student from Maryland. I'm pretty sure they have a reciprocity agreement with PA state grant, meaning we can take our money to Maryland. Maryland students can bring their money here. I'm not sure if we have any DC folks. I know DC is a big one. Any other states you want to check with your individual state grant agency or state education board to see if you can take your state grant elsewhere. Campus, meaning University of Pitt-Greensburg, any type of merit scholarship money from Joyce and Red's area, any type of scholarship money from our office, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. And outside agencies, you can do, if mom and dad work for Coca-Cola or another big conglomerate, check with them, check with mom and dad, see where they work, see if they offer any type of tuition assistance, because every little bit does help. So applying for aid, again, most of you have already done the FAFSA. You can see our school code in the upper right-hand corner there, 008815. That enables us to determine your federal, state, campus, and federal, state, and campus aid. You do have to do this every year. So when your son or daughters, or when the students in the audience start school next August 28th, 29th, you're going to be in school for about 6 weeks, and then you're going to see the FAFSA open up again for the 24-25 year, which will be your sophomore year here at Pitt-Greensburg. So you've done one now, you're going to sit tight for about a year, then you're going to hurry up and do one once you start school. And again, you have to do one every year in order to apply for financial aid. If you are a PA state resident, towards the end of the FAFSA form, there's a little button that says transmit this to the state. Click on it. That automatically transfer everything over to the state agency. They will use your e-signature for the FAFSA for the state agency as well. If you forget to, no big deal. You just have to go out to pheaa.org. Is it .org or .com? I'm having a little forgetfulness right now, BJ.
Org.
Okay. I've been doing it for about 26 years, and you forget these little things. FEA.org. You'll go out about 2 to 3 weeks after filing your FAFSA, and you'll have to go out and see if they do need information from you. Most likely it's just what year you graduated, what high school you went to. If you're a part of a divorced family, they may actually ask for the non-custodial parent. They have a right to do that because that is their information. Now, typically Pitt will award federal aid and campus aid. The state asks us to make an estimate. We'll put that out there, but it's up to the state to actually make a final determination as to how much you're eligible for. So they can come back and say, hey, we're reducing it from the estimate we originally had, or if they take it away, that typically means something is missing. That's your key to go out to the FEA.org and check that out. Campus and outside agency here. If you are admitted to Pitt, you can log into my.pitt.edu. When you log in, you're going to see a bunch of tiles, if you will, a bunch of little links. Look for one that says Pitt Funds Me and pay attention to the S as a $sign. That is essentially a two-pronged scholarship search engine. Internal to scholarships that BJ and I award called endowments or endowed scholarships. And that also puts you against all of the hundreds of outside scholarships we have in the system. There's at least 200 to 300 questions. Theoretically, the more questions you answer, the more scholarships you will see that you're eligible for, and you have to click on a link to that outside agency and go ahead and apply. And make sure you check back at least once a year, say the spring term, because they do add scholarships and add questions, at least once a month. And before we put these scholarships out there for the external part, we do vet them. So we know they're not any type of scholarship scams, or they're not going to ask you for money, pay me $500 and I'll give you $250 scholarship or anything like that. And I forgot to mention, someone can monitor the chat while I'm talking in case they have any questions. And if they do, we can answer them as we go along.
Okay.
Not sure if we have any Pitt employees, but you can see it's a 3-step process. The parent would apply through that link that BJ has on the screen there. HR would review it. Step 2. Step 3 is they tell us, financial aid, that John Smith is eligible for this amount in tuition benefits. If you see it's always out there as estimated aid, even when your bill comes in July or when you start next August, that means there's a breakdown in step 1 and step 2. So you want to call HR down at Oakland. If we have any UPMC employees, you are, I believe, entitled to $6,000 a year in tuition reimbursement, where you have to turn in the grades and some paperwork after the term is over. We have to count that as what we call estimated financial assistance. So it will not disperse on your account until you actually get the check and make that payment. Typically for fall, sometime in January, February, and for spring, sometime in probably May, June area. If we have any veterans in the audience and or students who will be using mom or dad's veterans benefits, Red is an assistant certifying official. This is our main certifying official. Her information is on the screen here. Do you have anything to add, Red? I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so I apologize for that.
No, you're fine. If you are using VA benefits, make sure that you go onto the e-benefits portal or the VA website and apply for the benefits. Even though you may be entitled to them, the VA still needs to know that you plan on using them. So make sure that you go on and apply for the benefits. You will need your DD 214, member 2 or member 4, depending on which part of the service you were enlisted in. And they will give you either a certificate of eligibility if you are getting post 9/11, or a notice of basic eligibility if you were using selected reserve. If you do have questions about that, just let me know or let Lisa know. We're happy to help with that. And then once you get that form, we get a copy of it so we can certify the benefits, so that way the account gets paid and you or the student gets paid as well.
Brian, can I just jump in here quickly?
Sure.
If you're in one of these categories where either you're getting funding because you work for Pitt, or you're getting funding because of veteran status, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing the FAFSA form. We want to get as big a picture as possible and see what quarters the money might be coming from.
That's a good point, BJ. Is if you're eligible for, say, Chapter 33 veterans benefits, you still can be eligible for a federal Pell Grant. So you don't want to leave that money on the table. If mom or dad are 100% covered, your tuition is technically covered by the VA through that program, and you still may get some grant money from the feds. And again, we don't want to leave that on the table for you. How we determine financial aid. Again, we come up with what we call a cost of attendance, and you can see that they're listed on the right: tuition fees, housing, meals, transportation, books, and miscellaneous expenses. Those are broken out into direct costs, basically what you would definitely have to pay to Pitt in order for your son or daughter, yourself, to attend, and what the federal government allows us to take into account. You can borrow for transportation, maybe get some grants for books or miscellaneous expenses. Typically, the top 4 are what you would have to pay to Pitt in order to attend. When you do the FAFSA, it comes up with something called an expected family contribution, which a lot of parents and students thinks that's exactly what they're going to contribute. I would say it's more of an index number. It helps us determine the types and amounts of financial aid for which you're eligible for. Now, what goes into that? That's your income, salary, investments. So if you had an off year, that's where you want to contact BJ and I, and we may be able to do a quick adjustment that would help us lower that EFC down. For all the freshmen in the audience, this is probably the only year you're going to hear EFC. As of the 24-25 year, it is supposed to be changing to SAI, or I believe it's Student Aid Index, which is essentially kind of the same thing. It's an index number we use to help determine the types and amounts of financial aid. It's just the way the federal government is changing up the methodology. You can see cost of attendance minus EFC equals your financial need. Now, the need is basically your grant money, scholarship money, your subsidized loan, your federal work study. So that helps us determine how much free money you have and how much subsidized loan and or work study you're eligible for. What does it cost and what help do we get? And I believe this is where BJ is going to take over. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if he can start sharing real quick.
All right, so we're hopefully looking at the scales again. All right, so what we want to do, and this is where the financial aid certainly meshes in with the admissions process. You're applying to multiple schools, and you're going to want to know what this is going to cost you at the end of the day, because that's obviously a big contributing factor as you're making this decision. So what we do is we give you what's called an award notification or award letter. And as Brian alluded to, you'll get the official one probably in early February this year. And what it'll do is sort of break down what the place costs, what you're getting from all those different quarters we've been talking about, whether it's federal, state, outside agency, things like that. And it'll summarize it in a letter that will tell you sort of bottom line what you're up against. You'll get an initial letter, and then anytime something changes, something else comes in, a cost changes, things like that, these will constantly be updated. So you may have multiple ones of these. The thing at the bottom right-hand corner is a version we're doing now. That's what we mailed out earlier in the week, which is a tentative estimate of what we think the award letter is likely to look like. And I know that's a lot of qualifiers, but we're going to be doing that because we're using estimated numbers, current costs, things like that. But because we have to wait until February this year because of the changes in the way the federal government is sending this information out for us, We wanted to get this in your hands as quickly as possible because we know it's important to be able to make this determination. It's also important to know when you do the FAFSA form, you can list up to 10 schools because we recognize your incoming freshman and it's still sort of the search part of your process. So when you do the FAFSA form, you can list all the schools you're interested in. They will all process the FAFSA form as we've done, and you'll get an award letter from all the different schools you've applied to. The award letters will be similar, but they won't be exactly the same thing. So if you have 5 different schools that you're looking at, you're going to have 5 different award letters. They're going to be formatted slightly differently. They all do the same thing, but they're going to look different. And this is where some of the confusion can start bleeding in, which is we may not be looking at exactly the same thing, comparing apples to oranges. So please, if at any time you have a question about the award letter or what something means, give us a call and do that with the other schools you're looking at as well. So what our award notification is going to do, it's going to come, like I said, in this year, it'll come as an email to your Pitt email, I believe. And it will summarize what you're doing. Now, keep in mind, each one of you is going to have a unique award notification. Each one of you has a very specific situation. As we look at this thing, the EFC, as Brian alluded to, is going to be unique to your family situation. So some of you may have the same EFC, but it's all based on how the income is structured, the structure of the family, things like that. So even at the starting point, that EFC that we use to determine need is going to be fairly unique to your situation. Cost of attendance won't even be the same across the board. When we look at what goes into cost of attendance, things like tuition, fees, room and board, or housing and meals, that may vary from student to student. So nursing students here have a different tuition than other students. So at the starting point, a couple of different students may actually have different tuitions in terms of cost of attendance. If you're living on campus versus commuting, there'll be a different calculation we use for the housing and the meal cost of attendance. So the top of the form may vary from schools or from student to student. Please don't even pretend to try to memorize or even look at this chart. This just shows you sort of the complexity of if you're in state versus out of state, there's a different tuition. If you're nursing versus something else, if you're living on campus versus else. So when you look at all this, it ends up with about 8 different costs of attendance, depending on what category of student you fall into. The award letters that you're going to get in January will still say estimate. As Brian alluded to, because we're a state-related school, we won't have final tuition costs until June. So everything that's going to go out will be estimates. We're pretty good at estimating, so we don't want a lot of surprises. And we're usually within a couple of dollars of the actual costs come July when they're actually loaded in. But it gives you a ballpark idea to say, okay, I'm looking at 5 different schools. There's a $40,000 difference between the upfront costs, but what are those final costs going to look like before you make a determination? There is a difference between the cost of attendance and the billed cost. The billed cost is what's going to be on your bill that you owe the University of Pittsburgh. So things like tuition will be a billed cost. All the fees will be a billed cost. If you're living on campus, housing and meals will be billed costs. If you're living off campus or commuting, those won't be on the bill. Those will be what we call an indirect cost. So the direct costs, when we look at this award letter, you'll see a column for direct costs and a column for indirect costs, again, adding to the complexity and the confusion of these things. So what we do is we find what category you're in. Are you living on campus? Are you a nursing student? Are you in state versus out of state? Here's your cost of attendance. Here's what you're going to be billed for the year. And then we start subtracting things out from that. So the award letter looks a little bit like a ledger. And the first thing we start with is that gift money, the grants and scholarships, things you don't have to pay back, things that are simply applied to the bill. So if you're getting a Pell Grant, and typically the University of Pittsburgh has a program where we match the Pell program. If you're getting a state grant, we'll put that on. If you got a Dean's Award from the admissions process, that will show up here. If there's any other grant money, we put it in a specific category, we total that up, and then we subtract that from the cost of attendance that you're going to be billed for. So in this particular example, it's about $3,000 in gift aid, which gets subtracted from what the bill will look like. Then we go to the next category. We keep the categories separately because they're treated differently. The loans are the self-help money, some of the things that you have to pay back. And the reason why they're separated out is you don't have to accept the gift money. The scholarships and the grants simply apply to your bill. Because you have to do something for the loans, there's another step. So we want to put them in a separate category because you don't have to accept the loans if you don't want to, or you can accept them partially. You could accept the subsidized versus the unsubsidized loan that you're offered. But on the award letter, we're going to show you what you're eligible for. And then again, in the yellow line, we're going to subtract that out, depending on, again, your year, your situation. The amounts may vary from student to student. So these award letters are going to be unique. Typically, if you're a dependent freshman, you're going to be getting eligible for about $3,500 in subsidized and $2,000 in unsubsidized, or a combination of the two, depending on your need level, for $5,500 for the year. That will be subtracted from the bill. And in this case, it actually took the student into a negative number, which means they're already getting more aid than the bill will be for. So they'll get a refund back. At the bottom of the page will be work study, because this is a slightly different category altogether. As Brian alluded to, this never gets applied to the bill. Even if you accept federal work study, it doesn't get applied to the bill. It's handed out as spending money. So that is important to keep separate, because when you're doing the calculations of what we're going to owe, what check do I have to write, or how much is left over and what I owe, if you're eligible for work study, and even if you accept the work study, it's not going to reduce down the bill. And that's important to keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out, how am I supposed to pay for this thing? And then once you do accept the work study, there are several steps you have to go through. You have to find a job on campus. You have to go through some other hoops. And then
BJ, sorry, BJ, I'm going to step in real quick. Can you go back one screen, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The one thing I want to point out, it's the last bullet point there. In order to complete the I-9 process, your son or daughter will need to bring their actual social security card, actual, I think, birth certificate or some type. It has to be the original document. We're not allowed to look at copies and make a determination of employment, whether they're able to be employed in the United States with a copy. So work it out. If they're going to work, bring it to maybe parents' weekend, or I'm sorry, move-in weekend. So you can bring it into where it needs to go. They'll look at it, say, yep, it's good to go, and they'll give it back to you. Or if you know they're coming home in a couple weeks, give it to them, let them keep it for a couple weeks, and then get it when they come back. But we've ran into a couple issues where mom and dad wouldn't allow the students to have the social, the original documents, and technically they cannot start working unless they see the original docs. Sorry, BJ. Thank you.
We put this slide up there because the award letter is going to show you what you're eligible for based on the FAFSA information that we're working with. And in some cases, the aid part, the stuff that you're getting is equal to or even greater than what you owe, and you'll get a refund back as long as you're not over cost of attendance. But in other cases, unfortunately, it's the opposite, where the aid that's coming in is not enough to cover the bill, and there may be a gap that you need to cover. And there's some other additional loan opportunities out there. One is what's called a PLUS loan, which is a parent loan for an undergraduate student. This is a loan that a parent would take out in the name of the student. It's a loan that the parents are to pay back, but it's on the behalf of the student. That gets applied to their bill. And then the other one would be a private educational loan, which would be an additional loan in the student's name. And oftentimes these may require a co-signer just because the student doesn't have established credit. But that would also be something that they could have applied to the bill. Now, all this aid that comes in, if it's for an annual amount, will get split half for the fall and half for the spring. And when you look at your award letter, it's actually laid out that way. So we'll tell you the semester amounts and the total amount. So if you're getting a loan for $2,000, $1,000 is going to be applied to the fall, $1,000 is going to be applied to the spring, because basically everything runs on the 15-week semester increments here. And we want to make sure that you're not having everything front loaded, so it's an easy pay for the fall semester, and then there's a huge gap to come up for in the spring.
And when you're figuring out what loans you need, even going back to the one screen where it said the sub and the unsub, and there was a negative balance after we took off the grant aid and the loans. Think about it. You're getting a refund. That's money you got to pay back. Only borrow what you need. So if you know, all your tuition fees, housing and meals are covered between all your grant money, scholarship money, and maybe 2,500 in subsidized loans, think about not using anything additional, because again, that's more money you got to pay back when you graduate. If you're taken care of through everything through the sub and the unsub and don't need a plus loan, or you only need $2,000 in a plus loan or a private loan, only borrow that. You can always borrow more if you run into an issue and you need it, but it's always better to do it that way than to get a $5,000 refund, not really need it, and spend it on Dino's wings on a Friday night or something like that. So only only borrow what you need.
Yeah, and the truth is that may be harder the first year through. It's understandable, but you will get better at recognizing what you need. And yes, you don't want to take on more debt than you absolutely need to. And that's for everyone's sake. When you get your award letter, the second page will have some other information that's going to be useful. It'll have sort of a what's next step thing. It'll explain where to go to accept or decline the loans or the work study, where to go if you need additional loans. If you need a plus loan, it will send you out to the same site you did the FAFSA form on, the studentaid.gov. It'll link you to something called Pitt Fast Choice, which is sort of a clearinghouse for the companies that do the private educational loans, so you can compare their products, their the structure of the loan, the interest, things like that. It'll have another link for the Pitt Funds Me, because we want to keep stressing that, because any dollar you can find in scholarship money out there is better than loan or work study money. It'll talk about where to go to find your Pitt Pay account. Once you're a little farther into the process, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Where do you go to actually pay the bill? And also at the bottom, there's a link for what's called a financial aid release form. This is the student's information. Okay, so if the student calls, and let's talk about their package or any other information, that's not a problem. If a parent calls, as long as they're on the FAFSA form, it's usually not an issue, but there may be some other involved family members who aren't automatically granted that permission. So this is a handy form to have, where the student can say, listen, I want my uncle to be able to talk about this because he helps with this stuff, or I want my stepfather or both parents, and only one of them is on the FAFSA form, involved with this. So it's a way of covering your basis, so that we can talk about the aid package with involved people that the student's comfortable letting us talk with. There's other forms like this as well. The registrar's office has a form, so if you want to talk about grades, they have to have a release form. The billing office, our accounts office, has something similar where they make you an authorized user, so you can talk about specifics. Okay? If you call and talk about, we can talk in general terms, but we can't get specific with numbers with the student's information, because it is the student's information, even though we recognize you guys are helping pay it back. And then the second page also talks a little bit more about what's downstream in terms of when bills go out, when they're due. Details we'll get to when we have to get to, but right now it's still a little early in the process to get bogged down too much in those details. But just keep in mind, the bill that you're going to get is for the fall semester. And we're going to work with that, and the aid will get dispersed half for the fall semester. And then at some point in November, you'll get billed for the spring semester, which starts in January here. And once again, if you have not done the FAFSA form, please go out and do the FAFSA form. If you haven't listed us as one of the schools, please do that. And since you've been through it once, that's the good news. You get to do it every year and go out and do renewal forms.
I mentioned before about the EFC changing into the SAI. Next year, there's going to be a full data match between the IRS and the feds, starting for the 24-25 year. So theoretically, the IRS data retrieval tool will go away. What that essentially is you go out to the IRS, said, yes, I've pulled my information from the IRS into the FAFSA. That match is going to happen automatically, supposedly for the 24-25 year, for the FAFSA that opens up on October 1 of 2023.
process. And hopefully that makes the process a little bit easier. Typically, if we're doing this in an auditorium, we ask for a show of hands of who's been through this process before and who are the rookies. It is a process and it's not intuitive in many ways. So if you have any questions at all about any of this stuff, we're here to help, because at pretty much every juncture along this process, there's points for breakdown and snags. And as I keep stressing, each student's situation is unique. So one blanket answer may not work in that particular situation. And even in the best of situations, things come up. As Brian alluded to, we're looking back at the 2021 tax information. What that says may be very different than what's going on right now in the household. So there are steps we can take to sort of mitigate that if need be. I know I ran through that pretty quickly. Does anybody have any questions at all about the process in general, where you're at and what we can do to help? I'm going to stop sharing so that we can.
And while BJ stopped sharing, I wrote a couple notes down here. If you were awarded any type of outside aid from whatever institution, let us know, because it'll eventually come into the payment center, be put on your student account, and they feed back into our system. So any scholarship received due to your son or daughter or yourself, if you're the student going to school, has to be counted as estimated financial assistance. We'd rather know about it up front, make any necessary changes up front instead of come September, October, when the money finally hits. For any of the PA folks, BJ alluded to, you can put up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. Maybe UPG's number 2. You end up going to UPG, which is good. What you'll have to do is you have to go out to FIA.org and let them know, hey, I'm not going to my number 1 school. I decided to go to Pitt-Greensburg. So they will recalculate your state grant on Pitt-Greensburg's costs and not whatever school was originally number 1.